It was my third semester at SUNY New Paltz when this happened, sometime in the middle of October. The air had just started turning cold, and the trees around campus were burning orange and red. Everyone was still buzzing from the first few weeks of freedom, and that Friday night didn't seem any different. My roommate Eli, our friend Marcus, and I didn't feel like going to one of the usual house parties or hitting the bars that night. We were all a little burned out on the same music, the same faces, the same awkward hallway hangouts. So instead, we decided to do something different. About a 20-minute walk from the far end of campus was a trail called the Huckleberry Path. It was mostly ignored by students, too far for lazy partygoers, and too secluded for anyone but serious hikers or those trying to disappear. We'd only been there once before in daylight, but it was peaceful. That night, we grabbed a speaker, a few nips of whiskey, and a backpack of snacks and beer. It wasn't anything wild, just something chill and quiet, away from campus noise. We planned to set up at this overgrown picnic table we found the last time, deep enough into the woods that we wouldn't be seen or heard. The sky was clear, and the moon lit up the trail better than we expected. Our speaker played lo-fi beats quietly while we talked, drank, and passed around a cheap cigar Marcus had found in his coat pocket. It was all low-key and peaceful at first, just three friends out in the woods, laughing about class, roommates, and all the dumb things people said at parties. After about an hour, we noticed a light flashing deeper in the woods, way off the trail. It blinked in short bursts, white, not yellow like a flashlight, and it wasn't moving. Marcus thought it might be a camper or someone messing around with their phone flashlight, but it wasn't shaped like any phone flash I'd ever seen. Eli joked it looked like Morse code, but no one laughed. We watched it for a while. The light would flash 3 times, stop for a bit, then flash again. After the third sequence, it stopped completely. We kept glancing at the trees beyond the light, but we didn't hear anything. No twigs snapping, no footsteps, no voices, just the wind shifting through the branches. We tried to go back to normal conversation, but all of us were off. Eventually, Eli stood up and said he was going to piss behind a tree. He walked a few feet off the trail into the brush. He was gone longer than he should have been. I called out his name once, twice, no answer. Marcus laughed and said he's trying to scare us, but I could see his eyes scanning the darkness, same as mine. Then Eli came back, but he looked different. He walked back slowly, dragging one of his feet just a little, as if he twisted his ankle. His arms hung stiff at his sides, and when he sat down, he didn't say anything, just stared into the trees. "Yo, you good?" Marcus asked. Eli nodded once, barely. I remember asking him what happened, if he saw the light again, but he just muttered something like, "Nothing. Thought I saw a raccoon." He wasn't himself. That was the first thing that felt truly wrong. We stayed a little longer, drinking less now, trying to figure out whether we were overreacting or just buzzed and paranoid. Then we heard something, a soft, high whistle. It was coming from the trees behind Eli. The whistle wasn't musical. It wasn't human. It sounded like someone sucking in air through a cracked pipe, shrill and wavering. Eli turned his head toward it slowly, like a puppet on strings. Then he stood up and started walking toward the trees. We both jumped up and grabbed his arm, asking where he was going. He looked at us like we were strangers, blinking fast. "I just want to see," he said, voice thin, like it belonged to someone smaller, younger. We yanked him back. He stumbled and cursed, blinking again. He looked clearer, like something had worn off. "What the hell was that?" he asked, rubbing his eyes. We didn't know. Marcus grabbed the speaker, and I packed up the rest of our stuff. We made the walk back in silence, half speed, head swiveling at every gust of wind or squirrel in the leaves. We didn't talk until we were back on the sidewalk near the art building. We decided not to mention any of it to anyone else. Not that night, not the next day, but something had changed in Eli. Over the next few days, he started waking up at weird hours, 2 or 3 a.m., and leaving the room without saying where he was going. He'd come back in before sunrise, and when I'd ask, he'd just shrug and say, "Couldn't sleep." Then, on a Tuesday, I came back from class and found our dorm room door wide open. Eli was inside, sitting on his bed, facing the wall. I asked what he was doing, and he said, "It's here again." I asked what it meant. He didn't answer. That night, Marcus texted me, "Dude, someone was standing outside my window for like 10 minutes. Tall, didn't move, just stood there." Marcus lived on the first floor. We didn't sleep much that week. We stopped hanging out at night, stopped drinking, We became the quiet guys who didn't party. One evening, a flyer showed up, slid under our door. It wasn't from the school. It was printed on cheap, thin paper with only 2 sentences typed in black. Some places are meant to stay quiet. You called it out. I asked around, thinking maybe it was some elaborate prank. No one else got a flyer. Eli left school 3 days later. He said nothing, packed a single duffel and walked out. Didn't even turn in his key. I haven't spoken to him since. Marcus and I tried to forget. We tried to laugh about it like we used to. But every so often, especially around mid-October, I'll get a voicemail with static and that same shrill whistle, always from a blocked number. Last week, for the first time in a year, I walked by the trailhead of the Huckleberry Path again. I wasn't planning to. I was just wandering off campus, headphones in, lost in thought. Tied to the signpost at the entrance was a piece of cloth, gray, dirty, torn from something familiar. I recognized it immediately. It was from the hoodie Eli had been wearing that night. I didn't go any farther. I turned around, walked back to campus, and didn't stop until I was back in my room. I haven't told anyone about it until now. But sometimes, late at night, I think about how different that night could have gone. How if we hadn't stopped Eli, he might have never come back from the woods, and how maybe a part of him still didn't. It was my first semester living off campus. After 2 years of dorms and shared bathrooms, I was excited to have a real apartment, a little 1-bedroom in a converted Victorian house about 10 minutes from campus. The rent was suspiciously cheap, but the landlord claimed the last tenant had simply transferred schools and left it behind. The place was quiet, tucked on a side street surrounded by trees and older houses. It felt perfect. The first 2 weeks went by without incident. I decorated a bit, got my Wi-Fi running, and settled into a routine. I liked the quiet. No parties on my floor, no surprise inspections, just peace. But then I met the guy who lived in the unit across the hall. He introduced himself as Martin. He was probably in his early 30s, tall and thin, with pale skin and a constantly twitching jaw. Something about his energy was off from the start. When I opened my door that day to grab a package, he popped out of his with unnatural timing and said, "You're the new one." I gave him a smile and said, "Yeah, just moved in a couple weeks ago." He stared at me too long before finally saying, "I'm Martin." His eyes darted between me and the package in my hands. There was a silence, so I gave a polite nod and retreated back into my apartment. The next few times I saw Martin, he was standing in the hallway, always when I opened my door. Once I walked out to take my trash to the curb and found him just standing in the middle of the hallway, barefoot, arms at his sides, staring at the ceiling. He didn't say anything that time. He just watched me walk past him, the skin around his eyes twitching slightly. I started feeling uneasy, not terrified, just uncomfortable. I installed a chain lock on my door and kept it on when I was home. I started opening my door slowly, just in case he was lurking on the other side again. Then things got weirder. One night around 1 a.m., I heard scratching. It was faint at first, like nails dragging softly across wood. It was coming from my front door. I froze and sat up in bed, listening closely. The scratching stopped, and I assumed maybe it was a raccoon or something outside. But then came a knock, just one, and it was too soft to be normal, like someone testing how quiet they could be. I crept to the peephole and looked out. No one. But when I leaned in closer, I realized the peephole itself was fogged, like someone had just breathed on the other side. My stomach dropped. I stayed up the rest of that night. The next morning, I emailed the landlord to ask about security footage. He replied that the camera in the hallway wasn't working. Typical. That evening, when I got back from class, I found something slipped under my door. It was a folded piece of notebook paper with a single word written in red pen. Awake? No name, no explanation. Just that. I didn't have proof it was Martin, but who else would it be? A few nights later, I came home late after working in the library and noticed my doormat was flipped upside down. A small detail, but it rattled me. I pushed open the door and immediately saw that my kitchen light was on. I never left that light on. I stood in the doorway for a solid minute, heart racing. Before I stepped inside, everything was exactly where I left it. No signs of a break-in, no missing items, but the kitchen light stayed on all night. I couldn't bring myself to turn it off. A few days passed without anything strange. I started thinking maybe I was being paranoid, that Martin was just awkward and maybe had boundary issues, but nothing more. I tried to let it go. Then came the night that confirmed everything. I was in bed reading when I heard a click at my front door. It was the unmistakable sound of a key entering a lock. My heart stopped. I turned off my bedside lamp and silently got out of bed. I grabbed my phone and crept to the front room. The handle turned, but the deadbolt held. Whoever it was didn't knock. They just tried to open it. I stood there in the dark waiting. Then I heard slow retreating footsteps down the hall. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I went straight to the landlord's office and demanded to know if anyone else had a key to my unit. He said only the building manager and maintenance did, and neither had logged any request or visited me. I asked if Martin had ever caused issues, and the landlord gave a tired sigh before saying, "Just complaints about noise, nothing major, he's different." Back at the apartment, I called a locksmith and had the lock changed. 3 days later, I came home to find another note under my door. This one had only 3 words. Why change lock? I went cold. I reported everything to campus security and filed a report with the local police, but without direct evidence, they couldn't do much. I didn't have cameras inside my place, and Martin had never actually done anything provable. He was just watching, waiting. I bought a door wedge alarm and a small security camera for inside my apartment. That same week, around 3 a.m., the alarm went off. I shot out of bed and ran to the door. The wedge had been pushed out slightly, just enough to trigger it. Through the peephole, I saw movements, someone stepping out of view, but not before I caught a glimpse of pale skin and a barefoot heel. The police arrived 10 minutes later. Martin didn't answer his door when they knocked. When they returned the next day with a warrant, he was gone, completely. Inside his apartment, they found strange things. A journal filled with notes about me. Times I left, times I returned, what I wore, who I talked to. He had sketched maps of my apartment layout, even wrote things like, "Find way inside without noise," and "Sleeps with light on." There was also a USB drive on his desk. The officers didn't let me see it, but I later learned from one of them, off the record, that it contained photos, dozens, all of me. Some taken through my window, some clearly from inside my apartment. No one knew how long he had been watching me before I moved in. The landlord said Martin had lived in the building for 4 years. The tenant before me had apparently broken their lease early, but never said why. I didn't stay after that. I moved out that same week, breaking my lease and taking the hit to my savings. I didn't care. I couldn't spend another night in that place. They never found Martin. He vanished. No job records, no family willing to talk, no forwarding address. It's like he was never supposed to be there in the first place. I finished school living in a tiny studio with 2 locks on every door and blackout curtains on every window. I never slept deeply again. I still don't.